in my channel, I often talk about self-defense, the use of firearms, and whenever I do that, I often mention my books, Street Survival Skills, Surviving the Economic Collapse, specifically Street Survival Skills for the aspect of using firearms for self-defense. Many of the things that I've learned in defensive shooting classes in different countries, basics are usually the same because they do work. But I always mention that besides my books, you have the channel. And this would be one of those cases in which what I'll explain in this video, which is very important, is not here in my books. So do stay for this one, because this is about that gray area in which things are not all that clear and are a little bit confusing, and you don't know exactly when or how you should react. And you know what? This is super common. It happens all the time. It's one of the most common causes of people that end up getting hurt or end up in tragedy because of disputes and disagreements and fights, either with family or, in this case, with neighbors. If you're not familiar with this incident, this happened in France, involving a British family living in France and their neighbor, Dutch 71-year-old man and his wife. So this was an incident that, this is recent, but what I want you to understand is how this could be anywhere. This could be a farm or a house or a cabin in a country in U.S. Same thing, doesn't matter. Just pieces of land and some houses. Yeah, that still constitutes a neighbor, someone living next to you. Oh, I have whatever amount of land. Perfect. There's another amount of land right next to that. Well, that person that owns that other different amount of land, that's your neighbor. And you may end up having problems with that person. In this case, the family lived here. And they had these buildings, the house, and so on. Let me move this a little bit around. So this is the house and the property, and the neighbor lived about there. And the dispute was mostly about this piece of land here, either that it belonged to you, it belonged to me, or I don't want you cutting the vegetation or the trees or whatnot, something about noise. So whatever reason, they had been having a disagreement and a dispute with this neighbor for about a year now. It got to a point where this man, 71-year-old Dutch neighbor, drunk and high on marijuana, cannabis, which, by the way, all of this new age bullshit about cannabis and pot being good and healthy and cool, I blame a lot of that on Joe Rogan, to be honest, because he kind of brings this thing of, yeah, pot is great. No, it's not. No drug is good. There's nothing good that comes out of getting high on anything. If anything, it's just a weakness that you should eradicate from your life. If you have any kind of dependency or, it's just recreational, bullshit. Any kind of abuse of substance or even the recreational thing. I don't know a single person, to be honest, that smokes pot and is someone that is very dependable. That's simply the way it is. And in this case, this man that was having a fight with his neighbors, he was drunk, he was high, and he had no better idea than go with a 22 long rifle carbine, illegal, by the way. He didn't have the permit just to own any firearms, and this was illegally purchased. He went with his 22 and started shooting at his neighbors. He wounded the father, seriously wounded, and ended up with that little girl that was playing there in that area. I think she was actually in a swing. Shot like 3-4 times, and that's how this ended. Now, what is it here to be learned? We are talking about something that if we do our part, there's a good chance that to a great extent we could either avoid or at the very least be better prepared for this kind of thing. So a few things to consider. First of all, just because you're living in the sticks or in the country, it doesn't mean that everyone is salt of the earth people. Bullshit. In fact, you may have a neighbor that's a complete asshole, a neighbor that is problematic. You may have a neighbor that is, cooking meth for all you know. It's actually quite common, especially out in the sticks. So all of these things you have to be aware of. If you're considering moving to a piece of land like this or purchasing a piece of land or a house, always look around and try to know your neighbors. Actually, knock on the doors. wave, have conversations. Yeah, we may end up being neighbors one day. You have these conversations if you can. You at least look around. You try to have a good idea of what's happening around you. If you see a house that is in poor state, it's not properly maintained, and whoever you saw nearby looks like a complete bum, well, that's never a good sign. Now, it may be the case that it looks like freaking Brady Bunch, and the following week they move and a lunatic moves next door. That may also be the case. So it's not set on stone, even if you do check out the property and the neighbors. So at this point, you have a few options, and my suggestion would be try to get along as well as you can with your neighbors. Sometimes you have a great neighbor, fantastic. More often, the most common thing, someone you don't get along all that well or kind of okay, the middle ground average is usually the most common thing. So here you have the option of trying to put a little bit more of effort of trying to get along well, waving, saying hi, trying to have a good relationship, even with a person that you don't like that much. I don't like my 71-year-old pothead neighbor, but I would try to still get along as well as I can and avoid conflict as much as I can. You cannot always do it. Sometimes, in spite of your best attempts, you still fail, but I would try to get along as well as I can. This is my property. This is my tree, and he's asking not to cut it down. Well, actually, even if it's mine and I had, well, you know what? Maybe you just let that go so as to have a good relationship with this person that is constantly next door to you, all right? So you make these concessions, you try to get along, you try to find a middle ground as much as possible. Now, it may end up getting to a point that in spite of your best efforts, this person just becomes increasingly hostile and it becomes an actual danger to your family. Apparently, that's the situation in which they found themselves before the actual incident. And here's where, as much as I said, you should try to get along as best as you can, when it gets to a point where your neighbor is threatening you with a firearm, then that's a big red line. You should not allow him to cross ever. Apparently, this man had already threatened the family multiple times with a gun. Personally, that's something you just can't have that, because at any moment he brings out that gun and ends up in tragedy. If someone is pointing a gun at you or at your family, as far as I know, you have every single right to defend yourself with whatever means you have available, and hopefully, if you follow the channel, you have said means. Now, will this be nice? Will it be pretty? Will it be as clean cut as a thug that breaks into your house? This man actually had no priors, nothing on him. He was a piece of shit, but he had nothing. He was not a lifelong criminal. You know, if someone breaks in and has a huge record, yeah, easy peasy. It goes pretty clean. Now, in this case, it may be messy, but you cannot allow someone to point a gun at your kids. That's the moment in which you do what you have to do so as to keep your family safe, because the next time you may not be around to do something about it. All right, so here is where you need to draw the line. Unfortunately, that was something that he was allowed to do multiple times, and eventually when he was drunk and high, he decided to, you know what, I'll take a few shots, and he did just that. My opinion is just that you defend your family and then you explain to authorities whatever needs to be explained. I was in my yard, this man started screaming, yes, we've been having a dispute for a long time, he wanted me to cut this, he was complaining about noises, or whatever. You make the explanations and it will go whatever way it goes. It's not going to be easy because this is a man that lives right next to you. He is your neighbor. It's not someone that broke into your house and, again, has a huge record. So you will have your day in court and you will have your explanations. But you keep your family safe. Above all, you keep your family safe. When a man points a gun at your loved ones, you really are left with no choice whatsoever. What else could you possibly do? So, just a few things to keep in mind. It's not always clean cut, perfectly white and black and white, and you may end up having to do a decision, which, you will have to live with, whatever that decision is. Okay, folks, again, as always, you have my book, especially for the economic aspect of preparedness, surviving the economic collapse, for some of this stuff, so as to do things properly with the adequate training. If you haven't got said training, you definitely need to get street survival skills, because I'll explain some of the things that you probably can't train on your own, so as to perform better if you ever need to do so in a time of need. Okay, guys, see you on the next video. Take care.